Very direct.
Very direct.
Internalizing the role.
That's kind of like Conan the Barbarian. That's good.
Do I have to wear like sheepskin or anything like that?
Not today.
So my name is Larry Reagan. I'm one of the directors. That's where I was going. One of the directors of COIL, the Center for Online Innovation. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to our talk with Veronika Godshalk and Kyle Peck. And I'm going to read a brief overview of both, and then I'm going to ask Ronnie to describe a little bit, before she goes into her presentation, a little bit, I'm going to cue her up here for a question, to describe a little bit about the level of assessment that she's interested in for the program. We were talking a little bit beforehand, just saying that when we use the term assessment, there are multiple layers that we can look at. We want to maybe hone in perhaps on one, but maybe keep it broader as well. So our guest this morning is Veronika Godshalk. She is a Penn State professor of management at the Brandywine campus. And Ronnie's research interest is in organizational behavior and strategic management. She's been a long-time online instructor. I first met Ronnie, oh boy, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago at least, I'm guessing. Through our World Campus program. She's always been a delight to work with. And she's now serving as the faculty lead on the Bachelor of Science in Business, which is a online World Campus program. And this background, the BSc, has 3 options, just by way of information: a management, marketing, accounting, and an individualized option, which I presume means that one could modify that or arrange it to fit their personal needs. Our other guest this morning is what I'll call the Penn State Badging and Micro-credentialing champion. That was a lot to say here on a Monday morning. Kyle Peck, good colleague and friend, and one of our COIL directors. Kyle spends a lot of his time thinking about sort of reimagining the higher education landscape, if you will, and I might say the whole landscape of K-12 on up through, about how these new courses and new options in that the technology enables us, badging and other micro-credentialing kinds of activities can fit together to form kind of a new landscape. So when Ronnie had approached me about this issue she'd like to pursue, I said, boy, I have the person for you to talk with, and that's Kyle Peck. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie and Kyle. Kyle's a professor in College of Education. He's done a lot of research in the area of instructional technologies, instructional information, and education reform. So I think we're going to have a fun conversation today. We have about 10 people here in State College in 324 of the Outreach Building. And online, I'm looking at 10 or 11 guests from around the states, I'm thinking, and maybe even throughout the United States. So it's nice to have you all here. So Ronnie, would you start us off? First, maybe define for us what you mean by the term of assessment.
Sure. Thanks so much for everybody coming over today and being here either live or virtually. I'm coming to you from Chester County, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, where we've had incredible amounts of snow. And we're wimps, and we admit to that. So that's why I'm not with you in person. But as far as assessment is concerned, I've gotten assessment is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Larry is very kind. Larry's known me probably for 10 or 12 years. Time goes fast when we're having fun, Larry. And back at that point in time, I was at the Penn State Great Valley campus and was doing, was one of the lead faculty who was involved with the accreditation process, the AACSB accreditation process, and was the champion for the assurance of learning, as the business schools call that, to assess how the graduate school students were learning in the classroom. So I've been doing this for quite some time, and just this academic year took on this position as the BSBIC program coordinator. That's a big acronym, but it stands for the Bachelor of Science in Business Inter-College Program. And I just mentioned that because the BSB program is offered at the 17 University College campuses across the state, as well as the 3 colleges, that being Abington, Altoona, and Berks, who also participate in offering the program. So we offer this program online now. It's also offered at all of those campuses I just mentioned. It is currently assessed individually at the campuses that I just mentioned, and because the program's fairly new to the World Campus, there's not been an effort to date to assess the program, which is why I have an interest in doing that. As far as assessment is concerned, Larry asked the question about how we could or how we might do assessment. And I'm a believer of starting, small and being successful and moving forward. And to that end, I would say that we could assess at the student performance level or potentially at the course performance level, making sure that the course that we're offering is meeting the learning objectives for students. And how we measure that, we can get into obviously a lot of great detail about how we measure that. But I think that that's very important. And when I look at organizations that are accrediting bodies like the AACSB, they're going to want to understand how our students are learning in the classroom and how the course learning objectives are being met by each and every faculty member who's offering the course. Now, of course, as in any program, we may have some courses that just are offered in one section, like some of the options that Larry mentioned in our management marketing option. We'll have 4 or 5 different elective courses that may only be offered for one section each term. And then we have other courses that are, let's say, the first and second year courses that, for example, MIS 204. I know my friend Jess is here today. We have 9 sections of 30 students each running in that course. So it is a full house, literally. And there are many courses like that where we'll have multiple sections that are being offered. So that's the level of that I was interested in talking about. And I thank Brad, who perfectly on cue is putting up my slides.
He's good.
And yeah, he is. Thank you. And so I see our opportunity as doing this type of assessment for the World Campus program. The World Campus program, the campuses, the brick and mortar campuses, have been running the BSB for well over 12 or 15 years now. So it is not a new program in any way, shape, or form. But for World Campus, it's fairly new. It's been just several years now that the courses have been offered online. And obviously, with any new program coming up to speed through World Campus, the focus of the development of the program, the development of the courses, has been course development, getting all of the necessary 20+ classes that are required for the program degree to be offered. And that has really been the focus of the effort over the first several years of the program. You can see from this slide that in this current term, spring term 2014, we have 70 sections that are running for about 30 different courses, some at the 3rd and 4th years and others at the first 2 years. Particular to the BSB, let's call it the 60 credits or the 3rd and 4th year courses, we have approximately 1,750 in course enrollments this particular term, and that's about the 4th largest program that World Campus offers. So you can see that the BSB is a large revenue generating machine for the university and for World Campus. To date, we've not done assessment on the online BSBIC program. So that's the question that I really wanted to pose to us today. How can the BSBIC be a data source? Obviously, we have a lot of enrollments, a lot of students, and they need to be assessed. And how can we do that potentially using badges and micro-credentialing? What type of strategies, may we pursue in order for assessment to begin? So that's the question that I pose for all of us today. I think that there's lots of benefits to many different stakeholders that would be involved in the assessment process. First, we obviously have a lot of data that's out there with those 30 classes that I mentioned, some of which are running up to 9 different sections. So there's many students involved in the program. And I've noted here that maybe we could talk about assessment strategies at the program level, but I think the question that Larry posed earlier about whether we should do it at the student or the course level, probably the student and the course level is where we should start. And I think we'd see a lot of benefits around that. As far as those who might be involved, obviously the faculty in the BSB program, there are several of us who would be interested in the research involved in gathering data and doing something with it. And I would imagine that at the park, there's probably a lot of PhD candidates who would be interested in working on such a project that could help them get that degree. So I'm always I've been involved, I have been on a dissertation committee already for an instructional design candidate. So I know what it takes at Penn State, A, to get tenure and B, to get a degree. So those things are important. I think doing research around it is important. As far as the instructional designers, you know, we've got, I know that I see Jess is here, and we've got some other folks there in the room that are a lot of our instructional designers that are associated in the program. And there's great opportunity, I think, for the data gathering and analysis. And I think a benefit to the program, obviously, would be based upon the data that we gather. How can that positively impact course design? So I see the assessment as really coming full circle and positively impacting course design. We're making revisions already to many of the courses that have been on the books for some time. And a lot of that revision is based upon faculty feedback, instructional designer feedback, but we really don't have student feedback. And that is certainly something that we could gather through an assessment process. So we're kind of doing it a bit on an ad hoc basis with some data that we have, anecdotal data, but certainly if we had more significant data, that would be useful. Long term, as far as the impact on the BSBIC program is concerned, certainly assessment is an important piece to the continuous improvement process associated with the program. There is some talk amongst Karen Pollack and David Christensen and those higher than them in the university about this program being accredited at some point in time. And I know that's a very long process, and certainly a piece of the process that any accrediting body would come and look at and ask about is, how are you assessing student learning, and what are you doing with that data thereafter? So I think this could definitely be the first step to a really important process, that of accreditation. And then finally, when Larry and I first began speaking back in December, an outcome of our conversation today and the information that I get from everybody in the room would be the development of a proposal for COIL funding to potentially start this assessment process. I know that my conversations with World Campus, they're very interested in what we're doing today. So I think there might be opportunities in a variety of different organizations to help us move forward and to get the funding we need to begin assessment. As far as some issues to address, certainly, again, there's multiple different stakeholders. We would have to, have an understanding of what kind of impact any assessment process would have to the BSBIC students. These are most typically adult learners who have a variety of different responsibilities, both at home and at work, and as well as at school. So we have to be sensitive to what kind of impact this would be to them. If we're gathering data based upon assessments that they are already doing in their classrooms, then probably there would be very little impact. If we're going to be going back to those students asking for additional surveys or other types of data gathering, I think we have to be sensitive to their time commitments. Many of our students are working full-time jobs and are taking over 12 credits per term. I never did that. I'm not sure how somebody can do that, but they're very committed to their education, and they're very busy people. So I just want to point that out. Obviously, an opportunity like this would have a positive impact on COIL and the university at large. I've done a little bit. I will not say I am a digital badges expert like my friend Kyle, but I've done a little bit of research into it. And there are very few universities around the country, possibly the world, that are assessing degree granting programs using these types of assessment mechanisms. So certainly that would have a very positive impact on all the organizations that would be involved. As far as an impact on our BSBIC faculty and the courses and myself as program coordinator, I mean, I would be very committed to something as we move forward. But I will note that many of our BSBIC faculty are instructors. Many of them, I shouldn't say many, several are adjuncts to the university. So understanding what assessment is and how assessment is done might be a bit foreign to them because in many cases these are not faculty that are doing research at the level that many of us are doing research. So there would be some type of educational process that would have to be a part of the assessment process, particularly for the faculty. So I would want to point that out. As far as a positive impact to research faculty or instructional designers, PhD candidates, other associates, I think that this has an opportunity with the amount of data that we could gather to be very, very impactful and very opportunistic. I could foresee lots of studies and papers coming out of our efforts here long term. So, and I would very much be an advocate for that. So I just point that out. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think there would be available funding and or support from your organization, from COIL, from World Campus, from University College, that would fund this type of opportunity. So I point that out as well. As far as the discussion is concerned, you know, I do want to open this up and answer and also ask Kyle to comment on several of the things that I've discussed. So we really do want to have a community discussion around how we might do a BSB program assessment. How would badges and micro-credentialing be used in doing some type of course assessment? You know, who would be involved? Why would this be of interest? And then, you know, critical things like timeframes, the proposal process, and, you know, what else have I not considered moving forward? So at this point, I'll really open this up to Kyle and to the group.
Thank you, Ronnie. It's an interesting. I've always liked the word opportunity, as some of the folks in the room would know. And I think you present a really interesting framework for how we might look at assessment from sort of top to bottom, which is what you've described, starting, and I'm not sure whether starting at the student level is the right way, but you think about student progress, and then the course objectives level, and then the program level. And I know that increasingly higher education is being asked to validate the student outcomes, that once they get into the workplace, can they actually perform the skill sets, the competencies that the employers require as well. So there's a lot there to work with, and maybe we'll start with Kyle and see what kind of thinking, how do we kind of get our arms around a project like this?
All right, so I'd like to start by saying that thank you, first of all, because I really welcome the opportunity to look at new ways to understand student learning. If the question is kind of, badges, are badges really about program assessment? The answer is really kind of, well, indirectly only. Badges are really not even assessment. So badges are great windows into what's learned and the process through which something was learned. But they do create the need for information that is critical to really understanding what students are learning and how long it takes them to do this. And so it generates a lot of great information that will, in fact, create a really solid program review, or at least one aspect. there'll be other things like, the response times between faculty and students and other factors that you'll want to look at when you evaluate a whole program. But I really do think that you're onto something here, Ronnie, and that one of the reasons I'm a real advocate about badging is that it forces us to really define what we care about well, and then to measure that well, and hopefully to allow students multiple opportunities to move through each assessment. So badging is kind of I don't like to use the term Trojan horse or Pandora's box, but sort of badging is a apparently sort of simple little thing that you bring in, but it really carries with it so many great opportunities to improve learning. So, for those people who aren't really that familiar with digital badges, it's a graphic icon, but when you click that icon, it bears metadata, which includes who gave the badge, what the date on which it was awarded, who it was awarded to, the criteria for earning the badge. So there's usually a little description of the badge, like a paragraph or sentence, and then a link to the actual criteria. In order to get this badge, somebody had to do this, that, and that. And then there's an optional link to a rubric where you can actually share, to an evaluation, a link called evaluation, where you can say was tested through a 30-item multiple choice test, or you can actually link out to a rubric and say, this is the tool we use to assess that student's presentation or that student's project. And then there's another optional link out to the evidence itself, the evidence that a student submitted in order to meet those criteria. So what you have is a little window into the whole learning process. And when you accumulate those, you have a whole series of windows across all the things that were considered important. So this really moves us in a direction of competency-based, proficiency-based, whatever you like. And those things that can be tested, the knowledge and comprehension level kinds of items can be tested automatically, and that's a relatively simple badge. But those other things that are really important, that are higher order outcomes, can be measured in serious ways as well. And all that data can become visible. So I think badging really does scaffold strong program assessment by making data and making processes available to the reviewers. I predict that accreditation in the future, right now, most good accrediting programs look at samples of student work, but they're hand-picked samples that we say, hey, here's an example of a student we'd like you to look at, here's a great portfolio, that sort of thing, and not everybody. But you can end up with data, hopefully, again, because it tends to move you towards a competency-based model, we stop saying you have one shot to get this badge, and if you don't do it by the 3rd of March, then you move on without that badge. Hopefully it gets people into a competency model, and in the end we'll end up saying, you end up, if you just look at the surface level, you end up with data that's like, well, 95% of the people got all the badges. And so you end up with data that doesn't reveal a lot other than the fact that you've been successful. So grades are kind of from a metaphor of sorting people, and badges come from a different place of actually helping people make progress towards a desired goal, which I believe is what people come to Penn State for. They want to get to that end. They don't want you to give them opportunities to do most of what they want and then be sorted into piles. And they're really here for competencies, for developing proficiency in important areas that we help them define. So I should probably stop rambling right now and just say, and then we'll go to specific questions and things. But I really think that this is a great place to do it. I'll add one more point, and that is the numbers that you have in this program, make a lot of good data possible. And with a lot of people moving through something sort of at the same time, you can get some really good understandings about what the common misconceptions are. So if you only have 30 people going through a class and 1 or 2 people, sort of do something wrong, it's almost unnoticed. They just say, oh, they didn't read it. But if you end up saying that, I had out of these 1,750 people, there were 150 that said this. That sticks when you see it over and over and over again. You get more data quicker, and then you can revise things and improve programs on the fly. So the data analytics are really there. And if you start looking at how long it takes them, how many attempts, and maybe people who had trouble with this badge also have trouble with this badge, then you can start building alternate pathways. So there are products like Newton and Smart Sparrow that are helping sort of branch based on aggregated data. You kind of set up, they're calling them states, we used to call them variables, to track not just whether somebody passed something, but sort of the level of difficulty they experienced on their way there. And you end up with a profile of a person that might help you predict and say, okay, we're going to give Chris the quick path through here. He's been clicking right through these things. We're going to take him to this, sort of sped up version, expert version of the next bit of content. Whereas Larry's had a little more trouble with this. We're going to give Larry the, the fully developed. Remember how you used to do this? And,
right?
well, I didn't want to take you there, Larry. But if it had been me, I would have gone there. Yeah. But the idea is you can even anticipate what version of content people are going to need based on prior performance. Now, you can do that to an extent with tests and things, but an MBA and lots of master's degrees and doctoral programs, it's really about higher order stuff that really can't be tested. And so we might end up with new kinds of data and more of it that we can use to give people approaches that work for them right away. A lot to be learned about that, though.
Could I try to tie together a couple? And Ronnie, do you have a response?
No, go right ahead. I was going to ask another question, but you go ahead first, Larry.
Okay, so Kyle, what you're painting in my mind is are some dots that need to be connected. So as instructional designers, we define course objectives. We say these are the things that the students are going to achieve. My question is, do those always translate into competencies? Seems to me it should be a complete alignment. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What I hear you saying is badges are a way to sort of validate the achievement of the competency of the objective. Am I getting that path right?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I enjoy the fact that I'm painting in your mind. I think that's kind of, whoa. Okay, what? But let's connect some of those dots. So I think so. Some things can be, whoops, sorry about that. Some things can be tested. I should know better than that. Some things are higher order things. The word competency is one that I'm not crazy about. So it kind of implies like a medium level of something. Yeah, Larry's competent, He's got this competence. Whereas proficiency makes it sound a little better. And as Pat and I were discussing before the session began, there are different levels of competency. And sometimes competency sort of implies a skill, right? And not so much knowledge or comprehension. But you can apply that term to different types of learning outcomes. So I think that we really are saying, figure out what you care about, express it clearly to students. Use the term learning objectives. Well, now we're sort of more calling them learning outcomes, because it's objectives sounds very objective. And some of the things we're doing aren't that objective. There's some subjectivity to some of the things we care about and need to help people build. So I think, though, that the thing that does cross and connect all the dots is you express what you care about clearly, you develop the best possible way you can to assess it, and I didn't use the word measure, because even in factual stuff, measurement is probably way too precise a word to talk about what we're doing. And then you communicate that well to the students, and you provide comprehensive feedback. Even if we can't really measure higher order stuff, the fact that we talk about it improves performance. So even though we can't be precise, and we need to get over that. A lot of people only they stick to multiple choice and stick to the knowledge level and comprehension level evaluations because that's something they're confident in their assessment. But that's not where the value really comes. So we need to get more comfortable at talking about and improving things we can't really quantify. Pat, I'm going to ask you if you want to add anything to that. Pat Shope is our PLA competency-based learning leader here, and I know she probably had a better answer than I gave to that question. Do you want to add anything, Pat? Not at this point, or yes?
Well, I think that all sounds fine. Competencies are something that, in my world, I've been working with for a lot of years, coming out of the training and development world before I came to higher education. And we always define competency as the sum total of knowledge, skill, and ability that one needs to have in order to perform. And so you can have different levels of competence, a basic and an intermediate or advanced, which might equate to your proficiency. In this world of higher education, I am finding that competency, the word competency is being used a lot and not consistently. And so as we're trying to work in this area and make progress, sometimes we're comparing apples and oranges and bananas, a few other things that people are talking about. A lot of folks will then use the word competency interchangeably with learning objectives. I, however, do not. I always differentiate the two in that competence can be broken down into learning objectives. So if we think about a competency as being knowledge, skill, and ability, then when we have learning objectives, some of our learning objectives might relate to the knowledge domain, some to the skill domain, and some to the abilities or attributes that we're trying to develop. Then when you put them all back together, you have a sense of competence. And I'll just stop there. Thanks.
Ronnie, you had a question? Thank you, Pat. Ronnie, you had a question for us as well?
Yeah, I was trying to envision and conceptualize this idea of badging. And I know that my friend Kyle knows much more about this than I do. But for example, in the program that we have, Larry mentioned this idea of we have options. And the options are in accounting or in management marketing. And management marketing is kind of a hybrid between the two. Students can take electives in either of those competency areas. It might be interesting, and the classes that they take are about 4 or 5 classes deep in knowledge area. So it may be interesting as we start to develop this idea of badging for the program to sort it by a badge for management competency or marketing competency or accounting competency, so that we could measure what students did in a particular set of classes and then offered them an assessment based upon their abilities. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. So badging is being used by accrediting agencies and others. We have a friend, John Foster, who came through our workforce education program here. He works for NOCTI, and I was just at a badging conference that Mozilla and the MacArthur Foundation ran in San Francisco, and Educational Testing Service was there. They're starting to give badges to students who take different assessments. There's a new one about higher thinking skills that they're trying to get colleges to require for incoming students, and they offer 3 different levels of badges to students in order to try and get students to take that more seriously and really give it great effort. So yeah, it does make sense to have maybe even different levels and maybe make badging options. So in one of your slides, Ronnie, you said something about the impact to students. And that was an interesting phrase to me, because I always think of it as being positive for students. It's great, students are going to love it. They're going to have a new credential they can show to people, and I don't think of it in terms of impact. But in reality, I think badging does cause people to take it up a notch. So we define things better, and we really want to measure things well, and so it becomes more challenging, more rigorous, and there is more demand for students. One of the ways I see badging being implemented is you start with courses the way they exist now, and you superimpose badges over the content. You find clusters of things that come together, and you say, this intro unit can be knowledge about supply chain management, and you can badge supply chain management knowledge. And then you can, go over here, and I don't know enough about the MBA to really use examples. But you grab other things that are higher level and are really about leadership, or about planning, or about presentations. And you can allow people to move through with the same kind of grading system you have now, but offer badges to people who reach high levels without really making the competency-based model and everybody tries again until they earn the badge kind of a model to it. So
sure, it's almost like a focus within a focus, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, in terms of sort of badging this, it can become an alternative or an optional credential. So say, for example, I'm in the strategic management, what are the areas? Okay, so in management and marketing, and that program is all defined, the competencies and the outcomes are all defined. And then they're all defined for accounting, and they're all defined for the individualized track. And perhaps a badge then, I like the idea of the leadership badge, for example. So let's say in the management and marketing option, there are courses that have components of leadership, different courses, and then there are courses in the accounting one that have components of leadership. So if those are badged properly, and I've moved across I've picked up different courses, the system now says, oh wait, he's achieved 15. Sure what the level
leadership badges.
Leadership badges. That now we can put together. So when I get my degree, not only do I have my specialty in management and marketing, but it says, and you have a leadership badge.
Right.
Is that
so? Yeah, and in fact, I'm reminded of Beverly Oliver from Deakin University came, and she talked about the way they've reorganized their general education classes. And they say general education is supposed to be about, cultural diversity, about the humanities, about this and that, and they have rows of badges, which is kind of what we're thinking of doing with the Engaged Scholarship here at Penn State. So Engaged Scholarship is to produce systems thinking and cultural awareness and teamwork, and so why not just have those categories and define what the category means, and then allow different classes deal with systems thinking. You might take 5 different classes that say, Chris Stubbs demonstrates systems thinking in this class by doing X. And at the end, he ends up with a portfolio that shows that he's got 5 different systems thinking badges, 4 cultural awareness badges, and then you can go inside and say, well, so is he a systems thinker? Well, here's what he did for this one, here's what he did for that one, here's what he did for that one. And so it makes sense to me to do that. The things you care about. We claim that the university is about more than the sum of the classes. And if all people do is the classes, then, we claim a lot of things that we're currently not providing any evidence of. And some of those we don't really provide evidence of because you get a little bit of it here, a little there, and a little there. But imagine a student resume with something that says, leadership. And it says, I took a leadership class, here's a badge for that. I did this, I worked on FON, I ran the logistics team on FON. That's a major accomplishment. And they put all these things together, some of which are extracurricular, some of which came from. So, yeah, I think we'll be surprised at the way badges from different sources may have, and maybe tags within badges too, so that you have that FON badge, and your FON badge may have a leadership tag inside it. But it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. Anybody else?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Kyle, that was I think Brett. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. My name's Laura. I'm an admissions counselor, Laura Anderson, admissions counselor for World Campus. Just in terms of badges, I guess this one's probably for Kyle. So what are the implications of that from an employer standpoint? Is that something that there's like a projection, like at some point they're going to care, they have that, they have badges, they're going to, like I'm imagining some employers now are going to be like, I don't even know what this is, whereas some probably already know because they're already hip to it or whatever. So do you know the like projected growth in this in terms of what those will mean for people?
Question of value.
Yeah, so the answer to that is that there are, like any big group of anything, there are people all along a bell-shaped curve right now. And there are, I would say that the big part of the bell-shaped curve is still haven't heard about it yet. But there are people on the one tail that say, this is great. I really am looking forward to this because I really care about the people I hire. And I love the idea of badges because now I get detail. Transcripts don't tell me anything. Letters of recommendation, twisting people's arm. I need to know what people have added up. And if I really care about thing X, Y, and Z, then I can say in my job description, I want to know about things X, Y, and Z. And they can give me badges, X badges, Y badges, and Z badges that allow me to drill deep on those few things. So some people are saying yes. Other people are saying, what? I've already got more information in a resume. I get, I put out one job, I got 1,300 applicants, and now how many badges is somebody going to have? Like 400 by the time they get out of college? Well, I'm not going to look at 400 badges. So some people, even when they understand the concept, they don't get the fact that people selectively are using badges to make a strong case for the things that matter most. And that the people you hire that's the most important thing you do. So the companies I think that people are really going to want to work with are going to be the ones that see that and take that seriously. I'll also add that the Manufacturing Institute was behind this from the beginning, and there are several employers that are really getting into this now, and that more and more people and more companies will start to understand this. When I was at this summit last week, Pearson announced that it's going to build badging into its engine. ETS announced a badging project. Blackboard announced building badges into its stuff. So badges is going to become mainstream. All the infrastructure pieces are really starting to develop now. So I think we're gonna see that. It came largely out of the employers, but one thing I'll add is what employers are looking for is they already trust us that we're producing people with electrical engineering knowledge and skills. What they want to know is, tell me about soft skills. So another thing about badges is it can be used for the teamwork, the compassion, empathy, that sort of thing. And again, we need to get to where we're comfortable talking about that, because that's the new kind of information people are really looking for.
Okay,
Well,
so
while
there's
the
a couple
concept
of
of badges-
comments that were made on the.
Go ahead, Ronnie, you go, and then we'll come
Go
back to
ahead.
Pat. There's a little bit of a delay. You
So
go,
there's
Ronnie.
a couple of comments that have been made on the chat. And Brett, a comment about T-shaped skills, and that was something that I was referring to. The idea of T-shaped skills is the fact that most college graduates are coming out with a horizontal layer of competencies and then a vertical or deep knowledge in particular areas. And so my idea was that if we go ahead and create badging around some of the deeper skills, someone's taken, the example that we gave, multiple different classes that involved leadership, doing things that, whether it is at their internship or at other things that they're doing extracurricularly that involve leadership, that those things can be identified and badged. So that was that idea of T-shaped skills. Brett had mentioned that, so I appreciate that. There was another question for both Kyle and I about how do you envision updating badges, and what kind of an update influence would that be on the BSBIC program? From my perspective, if we're gathering data in a badge format, I think that's information that we can use in a I hate to use the term, it's a good term, in a continuous improvement process to make sure that the classes that we're offering are, if we're focused on leadership, then we're offering classes that have leadership components throughout many of them. And today we already do that. I think it would just be an opportunity to enhance what we're doing. Kyle, do you want to comment on how we would actually update badges in the future?
So just quickly, I'll say that, first of all, badges have an issue date. So like my degree, my PhD was 1987, right? So I have a 1987 badge. And so when someone sees that, they know, okay, so I put that in perspective. Badges can also have an expiration date, a date after which they are no longer good. And there's one organization that's working on a process through which after that date the badge won't even appear. But think about Red Cross. You have to have training every 2 years or something like that. So you can make a badge expire, and you can just use an issue date. Also, I think badging is a great way to provide little updates. Right now, when somebody graduates from an MBA, we'll say, you've taken a whole bunch of great big courses into a great big program, and now once you're out there, you don't have to back and get another great big something. But if there's a new development in the field, why not offer, say, hey, online logistics is a big thing here. Take this course. Find out how FedEx does its it's overnight shipping, and amateur about this and get a badge. So, and it's a great way to keep alumni in the loop and give them something that's small that they can find time for, that doesn't cost a lot of money, that maintains that. So you can have I got this badge a long time ago, but I've been updating it with all these other things. So I think those are great questions, though. And it's like most questions in our field, the answer is really it depends. It depends on the content you're working with, the student, the employers, and all that. Pat, and then to Chris.
I was just going to add that when we think about badges, we're talking about a new term, and who is it worth and what's its value. So badges might be new, but competencies are not new to employers. That's been the currency in the employer world for a number of years. And it has, in many cases, more meaning than credit, which is our currency, because competencies are measured out there and valued out there. So badges is a new way of credential, but competencies have been used. And we're thinking now in this conversation about badges in addition to credit, but we may come to a point where it's badge or credit, or badges instead of credit. And so
I think ultimately badges will make grades and credits unnecessary.
I do too.
But that's going to take a few decades.
You'll be retired by
I hope. Chris, you had something to add, Chris?
Yeah, so this was just a building about employers, and Pat mentioned. I think we work with career services, badge initiative. From their perspective, they have figured out, employers that is, have figured out how to do this. They know how to take a transcript, like I was saying. So, but I think there's still a constant struggle with how do you get the best students, and that layer of transparency exists. Really good students who have been well versed in this, older students have kind of how to circumvent that. But there's nothing we do as an institution to support that. So I think that's part of the idea is that badges framework set up portfolio 2.0 that just provides a lot of proof to go along. And there's also finite limits. Emily Windenberger doing some research. How much is too much? What she has come up with preliminarily is 7 for the students that are interesting enough to look at. That's about it.
Chris Stubbs, by the way, is the leader of the group who's building Penn State's badging engine, lifelong learning landscape. More on that in another session.
Hey, I have a question for some of the learning designers in our program this morning, and I know who you are. I'm glancing out here at our list, and I'm also looking around the room. My question for you is, as you are beginning to work with faculty in designing a course, how do you see badges fitting in? And I mean, they're sort of, to me, they're kind of at the base level of the whole process. How does one begin to talk about badging with faculty members in a way that you can then, instead of going on and tacking it on in the end, which I've done, by the way, it can work, but it's sure been better if I had started at the very beginning. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of how you might get that going. I'll leave it open right now, but I sure will come back to people who I know have it. We can elevate you, by the way, if you want to put your hand up in the participant list there. We can call on you, and we can give you the mic there. So if you've got a mic and you'd like to jump in, I'm thinking about Kathy Hosing and Lynn Johnson and Amanda's here. So a lot of people we can go to. Lynn, do you want to start us off?
I can jump in because some of what you've been saying, I've been thinking from a faculty perspective in design where I work. We have been spending time talking about competencies, learning outcomes. We actually have a tool that we have people that developed. We meet quarterly with the learning design group, and at our last meeting, which was in January, we kind of did a test drive. We took this tool and took a course. We had a very difficult time because we still struggle with faculty, getting them to write good learning objectives. You know, it's understand. How do you know if they understand? Some of them, you know, they don't see the value in those learning objectives. Just this is what I teach. Students will get it. But so we're still dealing kind of at that level. When we look at learning objectives and assessments, it's very hard to tie them in because you don't see it. And we had, and I'm just going to put his name out there, Rick Shearer, who director of our unit, also teaches course. He gave us one of his courses. We had a hard time with his course, you know, and then he knows this stuff.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. So I guess a question, you know, we do this. I don't know if anybody's talked about badges. I haven't really heard anybody on my team. Jess Reese on my team, she's the lead designer for the BSB, very interested in badges, so I know she would hear this conversation today. So as I said, I'm not sure that we've started there. There just seem to be so many other basic things that we're still working on. Because another thing, and I guess my question, deal with still, you know, academic freedom. I don't want to teach this course the same way that the person, and you know, like Ronnie said, MIS 204, we have 9 sections. We could, unless the department or, you know, somebody says they're all going to be the same, we could have 9 different faculty teaching that course. How do you then say, okay, here is your badge, when you don't know the person who's doing the assessment, if it is the faculty, and I look at it differently than a mandate. So how do we get some consistency? How do we kind of get faculty on board to see there is a value in teaching things the same way, or at least, you know, making sure that those core competencies are the same regardless of who teaches it?
Right. So I think the issue here of academic freedom, it's about, so a course is a set of learning outcomes, right? And I don't really have the freedom as a professor to say, I don't care about factoring polynomials, and I'm going to throw that out of my math course. I have to say, I get to choose how to teach that, but I don't necessarily get to choose whether to teach it or how to assess that.
Because well, the department,
technically it's the department head is responsible for the academic. Yeah, technically it's the department head, but that's why, and Penn State and other universities have a long history. They're just now, a new course proposal has to have a set of learning outcomes listed. For a lot of the existing courses, there's not even a set of learning outcomes. So it's easy for a professor to say, to interpret and impose her or his, you know, content on a title. But that's becoming less and less easy, and as it should. It should be that this is what a course is, these outcomes, so you know what people can do, and then you have the freedom to to get people there in any way. But you, and I'm talking now about the professor, should be evaluated based on the number of students that actually meet those objectives in a way that you don't define. I think that this badging movement is going to bring transparency, and the institutions that see that and say, here's my opportunity to prove that we do a good job, their reputations will climb. While institutions that choose not to do that, their reputations will and should decline. So I think that there's going to be, by the way, lots and lots of good work for instructional designers. We're going to need, as this happens nationwide, we're going to need thousands of well-prepared instructional designers. And I think it's probably time. David Merrill and before him, Kent Gustafson and others have been calling for like an undergraduate degree program, at least people who can write good assessments. And let's take some piece of the instructional design job and prepare, you know, squads of undergraduate people to really help with this too. And then let's increase the number of people that can be here, because learning is, I mean, it's going to be a growth industry. And doing it well, now that we have all the ability to gather this data and look at all this data, people are going to say, well, you know, we're not really doing a very good job at all this. And then we're going to be the ones who come in and say, we know how to help make that be quality work. So.
I think what you're saying is, in addition to faculty, there's departments. I mean, it's got to go to the very top of the organization.
Right. So, and that's happening now. If you look, there are some organizations, Pat can list these too: Southern New Hampshire University, Western Governors University, University of Wisconsin Extension, University of Northern Arizona, and now, most recently, University of Maine, that are all saying, they realize this, and they're saying, making an institutional jump I'm a little nervous to say this, but I don't really even know who at Penn State could do that. If Penn State was to say, you know, we will go to a competency-based model, I don't know if a president has that power, a provost, a board of trustees. There's always this, there's faculty senate, and there's academic powers at the college. So we are in a situation where we're not alone, higher ed institutions are in this situation where we're not agile at all. And good things could start happening at places, and reputations can shift pretty dramatically, and that's kind of a liability.
But if we had a subversive faculty lead, let's say in a program like the Bachelor's of Science, and you know, I mean, we can have Ronnie, someone like you, I think, who could start to work with a you know, a group of learning designers and really maybe doing some of this experimentation from sort of the ground up. That would become a model, and we'll learn from it, and we'll become better at doing it over time. Ronnie, I want to make sure that we save off some time for you to respond, or to. What do you think about some of these ideas that have been floated about?
Well, I don't want to be subversive in any way, first of all. But I agree with what you've said, and I just see this as a huge opportunity for all of us. I agree with Lynn that we just all have to do a better job with the objectives, and I think the way that I look at it is to, you know, get faculty involved with the writing and agreement to learning objectives, because if I've had a say in what the learning objectives are for a given class, then I'm more likely to be happy to offer that class, even if I put my own spin on it. I think Brett said, you know, if we have 80% of the course fixed and 20% of the faculty have the opportunity in the course to play with it, then I think most faculty are happy with that. I kind of see the whole smokescreen of academic freedom, although I absolutely agree with it, and this is why I'm in the business that I'm in. I see that as a little bit of a smokescreen, because they don't want to teach online because it's different, it's hard, it's 24/7, it's this, it's that. So sometimes I see that as the objection, and it's not really, that's not really the objection. So I think faculty involvement is key. I think our faculty in the program that we're involved with are very interested in participating, and I think if we scope this opportunity properly, and, you know, small to start and then move bigger as we move forward, I think we can be very successful with it. I think we can all learn as an organization, as a university, you know, what we can do and what we can't do, and then use it as a model moving forward. So if I can, Ronnie, I'd like to sort of bring this to a close, but I'd like to maybe encourage you and your colleagues, your learning designer team, and your other faculty members to think about how the COIL community might come around to support you in this initiative. And just maybe to plant a seed is, you know, would it be helpful to have a program that maybe runs over a period of time, months or even perhaps a year, where we can begin to gather people, and I'm looking around on our list of participants today. My colleague Leah had to jump off, but Leah Churchin, I'm drawing a blank on where she's from. She's in a leadership institute that we did this summer, but she's very big in badging. And I'm just wondering if we could put together a proposal for COIL where you might convene some thought leaders in the area and begin working with the faculty and the learning designers to build a framework for how this might be applied to your program. Would that be of something of interest to you? Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'll be calling Lynn soon. I think you'd welcome that. That would be a really fun project. Any other last thoughts, Kyle? Any summary thoughts, or?
As always, it's a good conversation that raises more questions than it answers, but at least it helps us find out who all is interested and get to know each other. Maybe we can take 1 minute and just run around and have people introduce themselves, because I don't know that there are some people here who aren't listed who are in the room. Maybe we can do some.
Brad.
Brad.
Hi. Who are you?
I'm the There we are. Hi, I'm the Educational Strategy and Planning Manager for COIL.
Hi, Brett.
You have, you're going to put the camera on.
Yeah.
Why don't you swing it around, Lynn?
I'm Lynn Johnson, I work for on the BSBIC program on my team. Amanda Clinton, I've been learning several programs.
Does that help, Brad? Larry Reagan from COIL. Chris?
Chris Stubb from Education Technology Services and Kyle Peck, the development of these badges.
Or Anderson admissions. That you do admissions.
Joe, for the learning assessment.
Okay. And anybody who's out there wants to type an introduction of themselves in the chat box, that'd be great. And we have a little documentation of who all's here and who's all interested in the subject. Thank you. All right.
Thanks to all of you for
And
joining
I would just
us.
say, if anybody is interested,
You're on, Ronnie.
Larry, I was just going to throw out my email. My email's VMG3, like Victor Mary Godshalk 3 at psu.edu. Just shoot me an email if you have an interest in the program or in a potential proposal, and I'd be happy to work with you.
That'd be awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and especially to Ronnie for bringing your opportunity to the table and being brave enough to put it out there and let us kind of kick it around and hopefully give you some ideas and stimulate some thoughts about how you might move this forward in terms of a project where COIL may be a support for you. And thank you, Kyle, for being here and sharing us your background, Pat, the rest of the group. I'm hoping this isn't the last conversation we're going to have around this topic. I think it's pretty exciting stuff.
Right, and I'd like to invite people. These COIL conversations are opportunities for whatever you want to think about with other people. We see one of our roles as bringing, the Penn State community together over a topic. So this was a good example of a topic. You may have others that you would like to just rally some collaborators around and talk about. So feel free to initiate one on your own too. Just let us know. There's a form on the right side of the website, right, Brad, through which you can do that. Suggest an event. So if you go to the COIL website, you should be able to do that. Or you can just send any of us an email. That'll work too. Thanks, everybody.
Terrific. Thank you, folks.
right.
Enjoy the sunny
Thank
weather
you.
out there.
Yeah.
All right, don't
Okay, bye-bye.